Welcome to our deep dive into data privacy in 2025. We're taking a look at the ISIS State of Privacy 2025 report. And they surveyed like over 1,600 privacy professionals
Wow.
to get their insights on the biggest trends right now. And I gotta say, some of these findings are pretty surprising.
Yeah, it really does paint a fascinating picture of what's going on in privacy right now. Like, for example, the report kind of hints at potential budget concerns, and it also mentions a decrease in the median size of privacy teams.
Okay.
But at the same time, we're seeing fewer professionals saying they feel understaffed this year
Really?
compared to last year.
Yeah. Some
Oh,
teams are getting smaller, but people aren't as stressed out. That seems a little counterintuitive. What's the deal with that?
well, there are a couple of things happening here, I think. One explanation could be the increasing use of AI and automation for privacy tasks.
Uh-huh.
The report actually shows a pretty big jump from 18% in 2024 to 24% in 2025 in organizations using AI for stuff like data classification.
Mm-hmm.
So this shift towards using AI could be taking some of the pressure off privacy teams.
So it's like AI is stepping in to help out with the workload, but are we talking like a full-on AI privacy officer here? Or is it more about AI just kind of assisting human professionals?
Yeah, I think at this point it's more about AI assisting humans.
Hmm.
AI can handle those repetitive tasks and provide insights, but human expertise is still super important for navigating all the legal and ethical complexities of privacy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The report also points to what they call the big stay phenomenon, which is basically that people are staying in their current jobs longer. This could be because of the economy, or maybe people are just happy where they are. But the result is there are fewer open positions and less need to scramble to fill roles.
That makes sense. So less turnover, basically.
Yeah.
But this big stay idea, is that a global trend or are there differences between regions?
Yeah, there are definitely regional variations. So,
Yeah.
for instance, only 30% of respondents in North America said they had trouble with retention,
Hmm.
compared to like a whopping 60% in Latin America.
Hmm.
So, that highlights that there are different challenges and situations in different parts of the world. You can't really have a one-size-fits-all approach when you're looking at these findings.
No, that's a great point. So we've got this big stay going on in potentially smaller teams. But the report also highlights that there's still a big demand for privacy professionals, right?
That's right. It's a little lower than last year, but demand is still strong. Over half of the respondents said they expect to see an increase in demand in the next year, especially for roles that need technical expertise. And that's not really a surprise considering all the focus on data protection and the fact that technology is always changing.
Yeah, for sure. So when we talk about these roles, what are we talking about specifically? Like, where is the demand concentrated?
Well, the report shows that 22% of respondents are trying to fill legal or compliance roles,
Okay.
while 29% are looking for people with technical privacy skills.
Gotcha.
And that makes sense because organizations need people who understand both the legal requirements and all the technical details of data privacy.
Yeah, you got to have both. So it sounds like actually finding the right people with the right skills is a big challenge. How long are companies waiting to fill these open roles?
That's interesting because the report says it's actually getting faster to fill privacy positions now compared to last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, fewer people said it took longer than 6 months. And more people said that filling both legal compliance and technical roles is getting quicker.
So wait, it's actually getting easier to find privacy pros? That doesn't seem to fit with this high demand we're talking about.
Well, here's the thing. While it might be taking less time to fill a position, that doesn't mean those candidates are qualified.
Right.
The report actually have found that 73% of respondents still have the hardest time finding those expert-level privacy professionals. So basically, there might be more people applying, but the pool of experienced experts is still really small.
Okay, so experience is really important, as it often is. But
Yeah.
what are the specific skills that companies are having the toughest time finding?
The top three skill gaps I mentioned were experience with different technologies, experience with privacy frameworks and controls, and just strong technical expertise in general.
Right.
And then beyond that, they need people who understand legal and regulatory stuff, IT operations, and even like business smarts.
Wow, so it's quite a list.
Yeah.
So how are organizations actually dealing with this skills gap? Are they just like throwing money at the problem or trying to steal people from other companies or what's going on?
It's a mix of approaches, really.
Yeah.
The report says there's been a rise in using contract workers and outside consultants to help fill the gap.
Okay.
They're also using more AI and automation, like we talked about before, to handle some of the work. And
Right.
of course, training their current employees to move into privacy roles is always a good option.
Right. Yeah. So we've got this interesting situation where Teams might be shrinking, but people are feeling less understaffed. There's still high demand, but it's getting faster to hire. It's kind of a puzzle. But taking a step back, how much are companies really prioritizing privacy? Are they actually putting their money where their mouth is?
Yeah, that's the big question. And the report gives us some clues. When we look at how much boards prioritize privacy, the results are kind of mixed. 57% of respondents said they think their boards prioritize privacy enough.
Okay.
But that means there's still a big chunk of people who don't feel as supported.
Yeah, so it's almost 50-50 on whether boards are really on board with privacy. What about the actual privacy strategies themselves? Are they actually aligned with the overall goals of the organizations?
That's a good point. And here's a positive. 74% of respondents said their organization's privacy strategy lines up with their main objectives.
Okay.
So that suggests that, at least on paper, privacy is becoming part of the bigger picture.
But just because it's aligned on paper doesn't always mean it's happening in reality.
Right.
So let's talk about budgets. Are companies actually investing enough to support these privacy initiatives?
That's a key point. And the survey found that 43% of respondents think their privacy budgets are underfunded, while 36% feel they're funded properly. And unfortunately, these numbers haven't really changed from what we saw last year.
So no real progress on the money side of things. And even more worrying is that the report says there might be budget cuts coming.
Right.
How does that compare to other areas, like cybersecurity, for example?
That's a really good question. And it shows there might be a disconnect happening. While 43% of people think privacy budgets will be cut, only 13% think cybersecurity budgets will decrease.
Huh.
This difference could mean that cybersecurity professionals will have to do more work and take on extra privacy responsibilities, even if they don't really have the expertise for it.
It sounds like maybe some leaders aren't getting the difference between security and privacy.
Exactly. Security is really important, but it doesn't replace privacy. Keeping data safe from unauthorized access is one thing, but respecting people's rights and choices about how their data is used is a whole other thing.
For sure. So you've got these potentially underfunded privacy teams, and they might be facing budget cuts. It's not exactly a great situation. What other obstacles are privacy professionals dealing with these days?
Well, it's not surprising that the whole mess of international laws and regulations is still a big headache.
Yeah.
And then there's the ongoing lack of skilled people, which we talked about earlier. And of course, we can't forget how fast technology is advancing, especially things like AI and generative AI, which are creating a whole new set of privacy challenges.
Yeah. It's a lot to handle.
It is.
So how are companies actually navigating this tricky situation? Are they just trying to check off the compliance boxes, or are they taking a more holistic approach to privacy?
That's where we get into the details of compliance
Mm-hmm.
and how AI is playing a bigger and bigger role. Are you ready to dig into that now?
Absolutely. I'm really interested in how AI fits into all of this. Is it a friend or foe when it comes to privacy? Let's find out.
Okay, so let's try to untangle this whole compliance thing. The report says that a big 82% of organizations are using frameworks or regulations to manage privacy. You know, like GDPR, CCPA, all those acronyms that can be a bit overwhelming sometimes. Yeah, it's true. Those frameworks can be kind of a maze, especially when you think about how data privacy is a global issue. The real question is, are companies finding these frameworks actually useful for understanding what they're supposed to do?
Right. It's one thing to have a framework, but it's another thing to actually figure it out and put it into practice. So are companies finding it easy to navigate these frameworks and work out what they need to do?
The report shows it's kind of a mixed bag. 33% of respondents said it was fairly easy to understand their privacy obligations, but 23% said they found it difficult. So it seems like there's definitely room for improvement when it comes to how clear and helpful these frameworks are.
Yeah, so even with these frameworks, there's still a lot of confusion about what companies should actually be doing. What role do documented policies and procedures play in all of this?
Well, it seems like having documented policies and procedures is a pretty important part of the puzzle. 68% of respondents said they think it's mandatory.
Okay.
And interestingly, that number goes up to 80% for organizations where boards are really prioritizing privacy.
That makes sense. It seems like having clear documentation goes hand in hand with having strong support for privacy from the board. You need a solid plan to make sure everyone's on the same page and to ensure accountability.
Exactly. But let's not forget about AI, which we touched on earlier. The report says that more organizations are using AI for privacy tasks this year than last year, and fewer organizations have no plans to use it at all.
Yeah, AI is definitely becoming more common in the privacy world. But is that a good thing? We hear a lot about potential bias in AI and worries about misusing data. How can we be sure that AI is being used responsibly when it comes to privacy?
That's a valid concern for sure, and it's something we need to be careful about. But the report actually has some encouraging findings. The use of AI for privacy is actually higher in organizations that see privacy as more than just a checklist item. They see it as part of their values and how they operate. It's also more common in companies that are practicing privacy by design, which you mentioned earlier.
Right, privacy by design, that's about building privacy into the product or service right from the start.
Exactly. It's about making privacy a key consideration during the whole development process. So the fact that AI is being used more in these privacy-conscious organizations suggests that it can actually be a good thing. We're starting to see these privacy-preserving AI techniques that can protect sensitive information while still allowing us to gain valuable insights.
That's good to hear. So AI isn't necessarily the bad guy in all of this, but what about the human side of things? How are organizations ensuring their employees are up to date on all things privacy?
Privacy awareness training is super important. And thankfully, the report shows that 87% of organizations are providing it to their employees. The frequency varies, but the good news is that many are updating their training offered to keep up with all the changes in privacy regulations and technology.
Regular updates make sense because privacy laws, new technologies, and new risks are always changing. But how do companies know if their training is actually working? Are they just going through the motions, or are they measuring how effective these programs are?
The report mentions a few ways companies are evaluating their training. Keeping track of how many employees complete the training is one common metric, and so is tracking the number of privacy incidents that are reported. But there's a catch here. Just looking at the number of incidents as a measure of success can be a bit misleading.
Oh, so why wouldn't more reported incidents be a good sign?
Well, if the training is really effective, it might actually lead to more incidents being reported because employees are more aware of what counts as a privacy violation.
Uh,
So it's really important to look at the bigger picture. Look at the types of incidents being reported, where they're coming from. Is it internal or external? And analyze the trends over time.
that's a really good point. It's not just about how many incidents there are, but understanding the context behind them. Speaking of incidents, let's talk about data breaches. Is the privacy landscape getting better in that regard, or are we seeing more breaches than ever before?
According to the report, 12% of organizations had a material privacy breach in the past year, which is the same as what we saw last year. But there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. A big chunk of respondents, like 22%, aren't sure how likely a breach is in the coming year.
So, no clear trend there, just a general feeling of uneasiness. What do you think is causing this uncertainty?
It could be that a lot of organizations don't have very mature privacy risk assessment practices. They might not have a good understanding of their data flows, their weaknesses, or the potential impact of a breach. This lack of preparedness can definitely make people feel like they just don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, that's not exactly reassuring. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about something more positive: privacy by design. We talked about it earlier with AI, but I'm curious about how common this approach is overall.
The report found that 67% of organizations are using privacy by design when they're creating new applications or services.
Yep.
And how often they use it varies quite a bit, from always to very rarely.
So it's good that more than two-thirds of organizations are at least thinking about privacy from the beginning. But is just considering it enough? Are there any signs of how effective this approach actually is?
That's where things get really interesting. The report looks at the benefits of consistently practicing privacy by design, and they're pretty impressive.
Okay, tell me more. What kind of advantages are we talking about?
Well, organizations that consistently practice privacy by design tend to have stronger support for privacy from their boards, better budgets for their privacy teams, and more staff in general.
Okay.
They also say they have less of a problem with being understaffed in technical privacy roles,
Mm.
and their privacy strategies are more likely to be aligned with their overall goals.
So it's not just about feeling good about doing the right thing. It actually leads to real positive results for the whole organization. That's a pretty strong argument for making privacy by design the norm, not the exception.
Absolutely. And there's more. These organizations are also more confident that they can protect data privacy and comply with regulations. They're also less likely to have a serious privacy breach, although it's important to remember that privacy by design isn't a perfect solution. Even with the best intentions and practices, breaches can still happen.
That's true. Privacy is an ongoing thing, not a one-time fix. But it sounds like privacy by design is a pretty good path to follow. What other insights did the report have about this approach? Was there anything that surprised you?
One thing that stood out to me was how little collaboration there is between privacy teams and other important departments, like procurement and product development.
Why is that surprising? Shouldn't those teams be working closely together to make sure privacy is built into everything the organization does?
You would think so,
Mm-hmm.
but the report found that only 36% of respondents always or frequently collaborate with procurement teams, and only 34% regularly work with product development. So it seems like privacy might be siloed off in some organizations, which could make it harder to truly integrate it everywhere.
That's a bit of a warning sign. How can organizations fix this disconnect and encourage better collaboration?
The report does give us some hope. In organizations that are consistently practicing privacy by design, these collaboration rates are much higher, 52% for procurement and 49% for product development.
So it's not just about saying you're doing privacy by design, it's about actually doing it and breaking down those barriers between departments. What other lessons can we learn from these organizations that seem to be doing it right?
I think the main takeaway is that privacy needs to be everyone's responsibility in the organization.
Hmm.
It can't just be the privacy team's job. They need support from leadership buy-in from other departments and the resources to actually implement these initiatives.
It's a team effort for sure, but let's not forget about the individual. What role do everyday people play in shaping the future of privacy?
That's a great question. And it's something we should all be thinking about. As we wrap up this deep dive into the state of privacy in 2025, I want to leave you with this thought.
Hmm.
How can you as an individual help create a digital world that's more privacy conscious?
Yeah, that is a powerful question. It makes you realize that privacy isn't just some idea, it's something we all play a part in.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean you have to be a tech whiz or a privacy lawyer.
Right.
It's about the choices we make every day in our digital lives.
So, like, what are some examples? What can we as individuals actually do to make a difference?
Well, one thing we can do is just be more aware of what data we're sharing online.
Huh.
Do we really need to give every app access to our contact's location microphone? Probably not.
Hmm.
We could be a bit more picky and ask ourselves if those permissions are really needed for the app to work.
That's a good point. It's easy to just click accept without thinking about it.
Yeah,
And I guess another thing we can do is actually read those privacy policies. Even though they can be super boring, understanding how our data is being used is really important.
absolutely. And we can also hold companies accountable for how they handle our data. Support businesses that are upfront about their privacy policies and give us more control over our information. We vote with our wallets. So choosing companies that care about privacy sends a strong message.
I like that idea. We can also push for stronger privacy laws and regulations.
Yeah.
We can contact our elected officials, support privacy organizations, and make our voices heard on this issue. Taking action together can really create change.
It comes down to individual choices and collective action. If we all do our part, we can help build a digital world where privacy isn't an afterthought, but a basic, right?
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the state of privacy in 2025, let's go over some of the key things we've learned. We've seen that privacy teams are facing a lot of challenges like potential budget cuts and a lack of skilled professionals. But we also saw how AI can be a useful tool for privacy, especially when it's used responsibly and ethically.
We talked about the importance of privacy by design and how using this approach consistently can lead to good things for both organizations and individuals.
Right.
And finally, we discussed how each of us has a role to play in making the digital world more privacy conscious. Even small actions can have a big impact.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about, and I hope it's done the same for you. Remember, privacy isn't just about protecting data, it's about protecting people. So let's all make privacy a priority both in our own lives and in the digital world we're creating.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay private.